double. Floating point number. What is floating point number? Decimal. So of course floating point number decimal is a floating point number, and floating point number can be very big and can be means there is an art of mathematics behind it. But I say Musa is 16-year-old, and Musa says, no, I am 16 and a half. So how do I put that 16 and a half in integer?
16.5.
So integers do not have 16.5, right? Integers can only say 16 or 17. So this is a data type. This is how it is in the math also, that integer cannot have 16.5. So if in your program Musa insists you cannot put my age as 16 or 17, you have to have it as 16.5. Which data type you will use?
Double.
Right, to represent his age. Double, right? And then Musa says, but I have to ask my wife if I can participate in this program or not. Right? So you want to put a conditional in it. Say whether he has a permission or he does not have a permission. So things that can be binary, that can be just open or close, not in between. Yes or no, true or false, that are Boolean. You can use an integer also and say if it is 0, then it's closed. If it is any other number, then it is open, for example. But that's not a pure representation. So if you want to represent something that is just binary, open, close, yes, no, then what you use? Boolean. But, for example, you sometimes need to write his name also. So 16.5 is what? His age, right? But what is his name? So you need his name in a character string. That is a string type. And each character of that is a char type. Now, these are all different types of data types that you need in the program to represent a data. How we will do it, we will show in a second. And we have already seen in our first program a little bit, but we'll do more on that. Now, first of all, just to go through it, because it's a very important thing, that we have integers, we have floating points, we have Boolean, we have characters, and we have sequence of characters. We have more, but these are the basic data types that we will use the most, and these are these are very important. Now, how we process them? So whatever we process, there are some operations that we can do on each data types. For example, for integers we can do plus, minus, multiply, divide, and ampersand, which is modulus. Plus, minus, multiply, divide, but no modulus. Boolean, we can check different ways. These are logical operations, we will talk about it. And then strings, we can join them together. So I have name Musa. What is your last name? Kurbali.
Yes.
So if I want to join his first name and last name, I can use a plus Kurbali, and then it will become Musa Kurbali. For example, we will see how it works. Now, these are some basic data types. Now, there are few things that I want to discuss, which are again some of the concepts that some of the definitions. There's a concept in programming language, all programming languages, which is called identifier. Again, this is a very basic concept, so not a lot of people will directly use it when they will be talking about when they're talking about a program or something. But an identifier is any name or variable. And identifiers have naming rules. So this is something that you will see eventually, but right now I'm just throwing it out here so that you know that some of those things, once you hear about it a little bit more, then it comes back to you. Literal, anything that you put, these are all related to data types. So anything that you put as source code representation of data value. Variables, we'll talk about variables more. A name of a data is, or a placeholder for a data is called a variable. Or you can say name identifier of a data type value. And then we will talk about declaration, assignment, and initialization. For example, declaration, this is how we declare, this is how we assign, this is how we initialize. We'll come back to it, don't worry. What is variable? This is the most, in the data types, this is mainly the data type. A variable represents a memory location that can be used to store the reference to an object. So a variable, in a simple language, in a simple words, is the name of the data or a placeholder of a data. And we'll come to it. What are the properties of variable? Variable has a name. So I said name of the data, right? So name, variable has a name. Type, we are talking about data type. So variable has a type, which means that if somebody gives you a variable that has a name, you don't know what variable is it, right? Is it float? Is it a string? You don't know. So a variable must have a type. A variable has an address. An address means in the memory, program runs in a memory. So in the memory, variable is placed somewhere. Why we say it, we will maybe someday need it, but for the time being, you just need to know this is part of the property that variable has an address. And then variable has a value. So if I say I can have a variable without a value, then it will be called, so initialization, right? We talked about, I just told you, I didn't talk about it, but I just told you initialization. If a variable does not have a value, then the variable has not been initialized. If a variable has a value, then it has been initialized, right? A variable cannot be even there without a name. A variable has kind of no meaning without a type. But a variable can be there without a value, but it will be called uninitialized value. If it has a value, then it will be called initialized value. Kind of simple thing, right? If something like a container does not have something in it, then you'll say it's empty. Just like same thing.
Can you assign without initializing? So let's say you declare.
So assigning, that's a good question. But assigning will become initialization. We'll come to it in a second, hopefully, if I did not write it badly, because I wrote the whole thing in few different settings, and sometimes it is not that clear. So this is like a representation of variables in a program. What it means is variable is a container. Each variable is a container. And then, so just like you see, each variable is a container and it holds something. So that's like the visual representation of a variable. Now, what it means, if I label the container, that's the name of the variable, right? What about the type of boxes? If I have a big box or this kind of box, so that type becomes the data type. This whole cupboard or this whole place had all different containers. If for this container there is an address, right? like on line this one, on column this one, that's the address of the variable. And what you have in the container is the value of the variable. Just a visual representation. So, here comes I know it's very vague, right? But let it be for a few minutes, hopefully, and then we will understand it. And then we will, of course, practice it, go back to it, and then we will understand it much more. So, there is something that in a program, once you write a program, every variable which holds the data, your data usually is held by a variable. So, when we say a program is data and operations, and we'll talk about operations, but where does the data reside? For us to see in the program, the data resides in variables, right? So when we fully understand the variables, it is kind of small thing in the whole programming system, but it's a very basic thing in the whole programming system. So a variable, you have to declare and define, of course, a variable. And then there is syntax, there's a way that you have to do it. Which means, number one, you cannot assume a variable to be there. You cannot assume an initial value of the variable and other things. So how do you define it? You define it by, you declare a variable by giving it the type and the name. So this is a little bit slow if I use both of these together, but all right. So, no, but you guys can see. And show. So if I say int, and if I give it a name Musa, it becomes a variable. And this is the syntax. Syntax means this is how you define a variable. And then we have talked about defining, initializing, and assigning, right? So we'll come to it, but I'm just defining it right now. So once I define it, what are the characteristics of the variable I have in this Musa variable? Do I have a name?
Yes.
Do I have a type? What is a type? Integer. And do I have a value?
No.
Because I don't have a value, at least for Java, I don't have an address also. But we don't have to worry about address right now. At least these three things we should know very clearly. Type, name, and value. Now, if I have just the type and name, can I use it in an operation? Most probably not, right? And the answer is no, but I'm just trying to give it in a way that, of course, it does not have a value. What you will do with it? You can use it in a program after putting some value. So that's why there was a little bit of that, but usually for a meaningful thing, you have to first initialize it and then use it. So this is how we declare a variable. Now, it also says we can declare the same type of variables in the same line, which means I can have Musa and Muhammad in the same line. So what did I do? This is a syntax. So again, once you start programming, you will see a lot of errors in this regard. So it will be something to kind of look at it right now. First you define the type, you tell the type. Then you give a variable name. You put a comma in between, and then you put a semicolon at the end. That's how you wrote one line of a code in Java, right? What you did is that in here all you did was define two variables of type integer. Looks very simple, but it is kind of important. All right. Uh, so some other variables we can define similarly other variables. I can say double A B, right? I can say string C D. So this is how, or just C, right? This is how just I'm defining. I'm just saying it is not doing anything. When you declare a variable, it does not do anything. All you're saying is there is a variable, its name is A. So usually a variable that is just declared but then not used is not helpful, right? So you guys can read some of that, and then we have an assignment, variable assignment. So variable assignment is very simple. All you do is you put variable name equal an expression. Expression means anything. Expression means either you have a big processing that is done on the right side and the result of it assigned to the left side. Or expression means simple things. You say, we have defined int Musa, right? We say Musa equal 5. So, which means that now this variable Musa, which was an int type, is initialized with a value 5, right? And then once we assign a variable to a name, that variable has now this value. If I, in the next line, assign the same variable another value, what would happen?
Error.
No error. It will take the new value.
What did you say? Can you repeat that?
So I assign Musa a value, right? So I said Musa is equal to 5. And the next line I said Musa is equal to 10. So for example, if I say,
So you put two things in one container.
int Musa. No. So, right, so we'll come to this. So I say Musa is equal to 5, right? And then I say Musa is equal to 6. And I execute.
If you do like a print or some.
Yeah, we can do a print of Musa. So it's time that some of you should start working, or all of you, value of Musa is equal to Musa. Six, right? So did you guys get it? So we've talked about declaring a variable. We talked about assigning a value into a variable. And we talked about the last thing, overwriting a variable with a new value. So the program has no problem if you put a value in a variable. That's why its name is variable, right? And then put another in the variable, but it can hold only one. So what it will do with the previous one? Gets rid of it. It's gone. You don't have it anymore. So it's kind of like overwrite, right? And it happens in the program. And sometimes you have to find it, and it should be like this, but why it is doing like this? Somewhere somebody overrode it, or something like that. So there's no error. So it must be a logical problem, right? That you want to, there's no reason that you put 5 in the program in Musa when you are never using it. So it's kind of logical error, but of course it's not that easy to now, so let's, because I don't want to, we don't have a lot of time right now, so I just want to make sure that we at least write some program. So today, whoever has a computer. So what we want to do is, so in this one, I will, at least for data type, I had more things, but I will not go further. We'll just do some practice. So we talked about data types, right? We will keep talking about data types for at least one more time, a little bit. In here, we have an example of one data type. Which one is that? Integer, right? And then we said in the data types, we do a couple of things. Declaration, or 3 things. Declaration, initialization, assignment. Right? So which one, so what is this? Declaration. What is this? It is an assignment, right? But it's also initialization, because before Musa was not initialized. Right? It's clear? Musa was not initialized, now it is initialized. What about this one? This is also an integer, right? This is an x, which is what? The name. So this is variable has a name x. This is a value that is assigned. What are the different things that are done in here? Are we declaring it?
Initializing.
We are initializing it, and we are initializing it by assigning it. In this case, what is this? 100. What we name it? How do we call it? 100, yes, its value, but it's also called literal. A value 100, we can see it right there, right? When we see it as is, it will be called literal. Now, of course, it's simple, right? It's literally there, so it's literal. But it is something that you will see as a concept in programming time to time, that how do you put a value in it and stuff like that. So in this case, this is variable and this is literal. This is how we put a name on each, or a type on each variable, or each part of the program. So what about this line? What are we doing there? Operation, okay, that's a good thing. What else?
Initializing.
Initializing is there, right?
Declaring.
Declaring is there, Z is being declared, right? And the type is int. The other thing is, so this again can be talked about a lot, but so one of the things that I wanted to talk about, which I didn't talk about at all so far, is the mathematical operations. And then in some of the previous slides, you've seen that on int you can do so many, this mathematical operation. On float you can do this mathematical operation. But we will talk about int right now. So on int you can add 2 variables, right? Could I do x plus 35? Just ask them. You don't have to worry about being correct or not correct.
Yeah.
Of course.
You could, as long as X has already been assigned, right?
So that's a good point. That's a very good point. So if x is not assigned yet, then it's uninitialized. And would the compiler be able to know it? Most probably it would know. Because just like I said, in a variable, if it's uninitialized, then there is no need to have a memory space for that. So compiler knows about memory space. So if it is not initialized, it will not have a memory space for it. And if you still use it and the compiler knows that there is no memory space for it, it will tell you that no, it's not, it's use of uninitialized variable. And we can check that error also. But say it is initialized, so x was 100, y was something else, but we said x plus 35 as a literal. So of course, if we can use literal to assign, you can use literal for mathematical operations also. So we have seen a case where what is this doing is, first it is evaluating this expression. First it is doing x plus y, then assigning it into z, right? So it is defining z, then doing x plus y, then assigning this x plus y value after evaluation into z, which also initializes the z, right? So in one simple this, we are doing mathematical operations and we are doing data types, data declaration and assignment and stuff, things that we talked about. And this is very common, right? All the program is like this. I mean, not all the program, but a lot of inside programs are like this. You are doing an expression and then assigning it to the left side into some variables and stuff. Then you do an operation which is like printed, right? So if I did, instead of x plus y, if I did x multiplied by y, what I will do? Instead of plus, I will use a star, which is a multiplication operator in this case, right? If I want to do x minus y, I'll do an x minus y. And then I will end it with a semicolon, and then you will have z value. So what I want you guys to do is to take two variables, just like this, and then you do x plus y, x minus y, x multiplied by y, and then you write each value out. Got it or not? So define two variables. Everybody define two variables. Then define a third variable z. Put in z x plus y. And do a system out print line and say sum of x plus y in z, just like this, right? Then after this, do an x minus y and do difference of x minus of x and y is this. Then do x multiplied by y and write this, and then do x divided by y and write this. You guys got it? Or so let me give you one example. So you guys can start if you want to, but I will say put. So this we already had, right? So all you can do is say copy and paste and then modify it. You already have x and y. You can say int z is equal to x minus y, and then you say difference of x y is equal to z, right?
Abdul,
Yes, sir.
when I try to define like a string,
Yes. Why you are defining the string right now?
we're not, huh?
We are not right now, but we'll talk about it. We can talk about it.
Okay.
But you guys see this. So I did define x, y, z, and then I did x plus y, and then I did z is equal to x minus y, and I did say difference of x, y is z, and then I see 135 and 65. So it looks like it ran correctly. So you have to do the same thing, just like last two lines I added. You have to add another two lines for multiply, and then another 2 lines for divide, and then see what are the results of it. Yes, Mohammed, looks like you're going to string. Good, good, good. Good, string D is equal to for the people. Yeah, good.
But
It is giving an
it
error.
gives me an error. When I try to how to define an integer and a double.
So you have to go. No, before that, yeah. But you have to do that. Wait, unresolved comparison. String cannot be resolved to.
I think you tried the second too. Or you can change the system.
Let's see. Make it uppercase.
Yes, so I think if you update Z's operation to minus, it's going to choose the minus one. Get it? So if you update the Z minus, X minus.
It's case sensitive.
Yeah. And then I didn't tell you that it's uppercase because I have not even come to strings yet.
It's funny that the other ones, other classes, integer, double, they don't have to be.
So what are you
No,
telling me?
because I didn't explain again just because it becomes too lengthy. Float and char. They are built-in data types. It's called built-in data types, which is part of Java language.
Okay.
Now, string is primitive data type.
Okay.
It is also almost the same way as Java language. Without it, there is no language.
Okay.
But still, it's not on the same exact level as integer and so string is actually an object. Int and double and char are not objects. So that's a Java thing again. But that's the difference.
Okay.
Yes, Musa.
What do you want us to do? Have that.
Ask him. You understand what is the ask?
So minus
Plus, minus, multiply, divide. Doing good?
Yeah, just coupling
So minus, right? So add, multiply, and divide.
So it's even an error.
So no problem. Alright. So find out why is this error? It's a good error that Brother Abdul-Hamid is getting. Brother Abdul-Hamid, can you tell what the error is?
Yeah, it says variable Z is already defined in the main string.
Variable Z is already defined in the main string.
So where do you want us to change?
Is it already defined somewhere?